Breaking news, Claudine Gay is out as president of Harvard, but it's instructive to look back on what didn't get her fired. Also, President Mashed Potato Brains had his toughest interview yet with Ryan Seacrest. And do you ever find it hard to explain exactly why the transgender activist agenda is somehow off-putting and hard to sort of explain? Well, Dave Chappelle has a fascinating story about Jim Carrey that sort of encapsulates the entire issue. And you'll see that and a whole lot more next. That's right, we're back, and we hope you had a great Christmas and a great New Year. I'm Larry O'Connor. Call me Larry, and let's get right to the breaking news. That's right, Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard, is now kaput, out, donezo, finished. Ash heap of history. I mean, she'll run for Senate, maybe even president, but she's no longer the president of Harvard University. This after weeks of plagiarism charges. In fact, the latest round of plagiarism accusations uncovered by investigative reporters at the Washington Free Beacon. Yeah, I was pausing for dramatic effect because it wasn't the New York Times, it wasn't the Washington Post, it wasn't the networks. No. They went ahead and took a back seat. They weren't curious at all about the plagiarism accusations. It was the plucky little investigative reporters at the Washington Free Beacon. They're right across the street from us over here, aren't they? Yeah, they are. Good for the Free Beacon. They found the latest round of plagiarism charges, which now mount up to 50 accusations against Claudine Gay. Those were broken yesterday afternoon, and now she's done. It's been announced that later today she will be resigning from Harvard. Now, let's be clear here. Obviously, the pressure on her was insurmountable. I mean, if your kid is at Harvard, if you're at Harvard and you've got to turn in a paper, what's stopping you from just cutting and pasting something and sending it to your professor and say, yeah, what are you going to do about it? Right? I mean, the marker had been laid. Obviously, Harvard was fine, A-okay, with plagiarism. And, well, that was untenable, despite the fact that none other than alum President Barack Obama apparently tried to intervene on her behalf and persuaded the Board of Regents or the Harvard Corporation, or whatever they call themselves these days, to keep her on because she's so vitally, critically important to higher education in America. Well, it finally broke down. The weight upon her and the accusations against her for her plagiarism finally sent her packing, and she'll be gone. And that's a good thing. Good for Harvard, good for truth, good for reality, good for fair play. But I think it's instructive to pause for a moment and remind ourselves what didn't get her fired. Yes, after weeks and weeks of investigations and the fact that plagiarism accusations reached the point of no return for her, that sent her packing. But Harvard is just fine with their acquiescence to anti-Semitism on the Harvard campus. I mean, the thing that brought Claudine Gay into the public spotlight a month ago this week was her testimony before Elise Stefanik in the House of Representatives when she was asked point blank, well, I'll let you see it.
So based upon your testimony, you understand that this call for intifada is to commit genocide against the Jewish people in Israel and globally, correct?
I will say again, that type of hateful speech is personally abhorrent to me.
Do you believe that type of hateful speech is contrary to Harvard's code of conduct, or is it allowed at Harvard?
It is at odds with the values of Harvard.
Can you
But
not
our
say here that it is
values
against the
also-
code of conduct at Harvard?
We embrace a commitment to free expression, even of views that are objectionable, offensive, hateful. It's when that
the air of arrogance and superiority as she's rolling her eyes that she actually even has to deign to respond to questions from the likes of Elise Stefanik. I mean, she's a Republican after all. I can't believe I have to even waste my time here explaining free speech to you, which of course Harvard knows nothing about free speech. Just ask any conservative who tried to give a speech on that campus. But the question is very simple that she refuses to answer. Is this kind of language against the code of conduct? She won't say it. She won't say it because if it is against the code of conduct, you should be expelled. And she was protecting the anti-Semites. And she was, frankly, ticked off that she even had to. Don't you know who I am? I'm Claudine Gay. I'm the president of Harvard.
Speech crosses into conduct that violates our policies against bullying, harassment.
Does that speech not cross that barrier? Does that speech not call for the genocide of Jews and the elimination of Israel?
When
you testify that you understand that is the definition of intifada. Is that speech according to the code of conduct or not?
We embrace a commitment to free expression and give a wide berth to free expression, even of views that are objectionable.
You and I both know that's not the case. You were aware that Harvard ranked dead last when it came to free speech. Are you not aware of that report?
Yeah, she's not aware because she doesn't care, but it's true. Harvard ranked dead last, and then here she is championing free speech, as long as it's the anti-Semites calling for the elimination of Jews. I want to be clear here. That, what you just saw, did not get Claudine Gay fired. In fact, the powers that be at Harvard absolutely rubber stamped it and endorsed it. Harvard hasn't fixed anything by getting rid of her. It's a PR move at best. Elise Stefanik summed up the testimony with this.
Harvard ranks the lowest when it comes to protecting Jewish students. This is why I've called for your resignation, and your testimony today, not being able to answer with moral clarity, speaks volumes.
It sure does. And she did call for her resignation. And now, a little over 4 weeks later, Elise Stefanik actually has some kind of affirmation for her position. She is validated here by Harvard's Board of Regents finally coming through and asking Claudine Gay for her resignation. But let's be clear, Harvard isn't solving anything by getting rid of her. They'll replace her with the next Claudine Gay that is approved of by Barack Obama. They'll probably vet her a little better. Oh, it will be a her, trust me. Maybe trans. Either way, they'll vet her a little bit better, and they'll cross-reference whether there's any plagiarism going on there. But it'll be the exact same thing. Nothing has changed. As long as the powers that be at Harvard are just fine with Claudine Gay not expelling a student for calling for the genocide of Jews and the elimination of the Jewish state, as long as they're okay with that, Harvard hasn't solved a damn thing. But congratulations to the Washington Free Beacon. And boy, ask yourselves all the democracy dies in darkness types and the journalists who wrap themselves around the First Amendment and the freedom of the press and speaking truth to power. Where the hell have they been for the last 4 weeks as this story has grown and grown and grown? They were perfectly fine taking a back seat and letting the plucky little journalists at Washington Free Beacon scoop them on a daily basis. It's not like it was that hard to figure out. I mean, no offense, guys at the Free Beacon, but I mean, you're not the smartest people. I've been drinking with you. You're not that great. The Washington Post and the New York Times just let you have it. Yeah, we're not interested in this story. I hope the Pulitzer people are watching. They don't care either. Which brings us to the latest lieutenant colonel in the United States military. This person with the United States Space Force demands that you acknowledge him as a her. This officer, a lieutenant colonel in the Space Force, demands that you throw away all objective logic and treat him as a woman because he's grown his hair out long, changed his name, and wears a skirt. But even more so, if you watch this clip here from this appearance, he demands that this farce, this charade, this theatrical performance be embraced at all levels of corporate America and our government because it will make us better.
So inclusion is a national security imperative.
Is it? Is inclusion a national security imperative? When the Marine Corps was founded back in the 18th century, they just celebrated their birthday, by the way. Do you think that when the Marine Corps was founded, they said to themselves, guys, we're here for inclusion purposes. We can't protect America unless we're inclusive. When George Washington led the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War against the the British military, the single greatest fighting force on the planet at that time. Do you think he won because of inclusion? Is it really a national security imperative? When you see the attacks of October 7th in Israel and recognize that that terrorist attack could happen here tomorrow, do you think to yourself, my God, I hope the people protecting us are focusing on inclusion? This is an officer in the United States military telling us that inclusion is a national security. And he's going to explain, she's going to explain why.
We fight today and we are going to fight in the future using brain power. And if that brain, who's going to revolutionize the way we fight in space, we fight in cyber, just happens to be in a trans body, you should want them all serving alongside me. And for your organizations, it's the same way. Those perspectives that we get from a diverse set of individuals, it's been talked about on stage a lot regarding the science behind high-performing teams. We need those perspectives. But it's inclusion that actually drives that. Because you can bring people in, and if they don't feel safe to speak up, if they don't feel safe to bring their full selves to work, you're not going to get the value of the diversity. So for us, it is absolutely critical to drive our future success as an organization and potentially on the battlefield. And I think it's the same way for all of you, because we can't leave that talent that is going to revolutionize the way we do business behind.
It's funny that this person just used the term on the battlefield. You know, we're going to fight our wars with brain power. Brain power, really. You remember when Joe Biden was orchestrating the disastrous pullout from Afghanistan and people were hanging from airplanes at the airport, and we had to send another couple of thousand troops back in there to secure the area and help for the disastrous pullout so that he could get better images on cable news. And there was a terrorist attack. Remember, 13 members of the military died in a suicide bomb there at Hamid-Karzai Airport. You remember this, right? Because of Joe Biden, because of the Pentagon, because of the disastrous plans that they had for the pullout. Those 13 Americans died that day from a terror attack. And I've got to ask this person, why did they have to be there? Why did we send those 13 service members there? Why did they die on the battlefield when we could have just solved everything with brain power? If we're going to fight all of our wars and win all of our wars with brain power, we got to think that the brains like this person are in charge, right? I mean, think about all of the young men, mostly men, who died in Afghanistan and Iraq over the last 20 years. Why did they have to go? I thought we were fighting with brain power. They just said, this person, this individual, posing as a woman, just said that eventually we need to win on a battlefield. What do you mean battlefield? No more boots on the ground. No more soldiers, no more Marines, no more fighting, no more tanks. We're just going to win with brain power. So it doesn't matter, right? I don't see this dude putting on combat boots and grabbing a gun to go kill our enemies. Wearing a skirt and getting invited to really high-profile panels to talk about how important inclusivity is. And they're expecting you to send your son to go and fight. You wonder why our military is behind in their recruitment numbers? You wonder why we're failing to hit any of our marks with regard to staffing needs in our military? This is why. This is why. And that person, this is who gets celebrated by the military today. A dude who just a couple of years ago identified as a dude, and now because of long hair and a skirt is suddenly a woman, and they're the one, this lieutenant colonel, right? What's that, a 05? Lieutenant Captain, yeah, an 05, I got it right. This 05 is now celebrated and put on a pedestal, not because of achievements, not because of brain power, pardon me, because he's decided to wear a skirt. And I assure you, a new commander-in-chief with a new Secretary of Defense will not make this the priority for your military. This is happening because of politics. And it's good to know. It's good to know that the next time your child is called up for duty and asked to go fight in a war, that you can just step back and say, oh, no, sorry, we're not needed. I've been told we're fighting all of our wars with just brain power. So go ahead and get Dylan Mulvaney to fight the next war for us. That's where we are. Oh, speaking of the commander-in-chief, Joe Biden, live from St. Croix in the Virgin Islands, which is part of the United States. It's a United States territory. It's also just a couple hundred nautical miles away from Epstein Island. Did you know that? Yeah. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying. I mean, it's time for a holiday, and he decides to go a stone's throw away from Epstein Island. I'm sure that there's not a cleanup operation in process. I'm sure that's not the case. Did Hunter go with him? I'm not sure. Anyway, he's down in the Virgin Islands, and he decides to connect with Ryan Seacrest during Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve. That's right. Ryan Seacrest is still playing the part of Dick Clark on Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve. And I got to tell you, this is one of the most hard-hitting interviews Joe Biden sat for in all of 2023. Here's the look back.
As you look back and reflect on 2023, what sort of memories, highlights stand out for you?
Well, George Stephanopoulos is sitting at home right now thinking, damn it, why didn't I think of answering that question? That could have been me. Jake Tapper's like, oh, damn you, Seacrest. You ask all the tough questions. Okay, sorry. Let's get the answer, shall we? Looking back on 2023. What was the question again? Because the question is critically important. Remember the question when you hear his answer.
As you look back and reflect on 2023, what sort of memories, highlights stand out for you?
All right. What kind of highlights in 2023 stand out? And I also want to point out here, well, I'll show you in a minute, because he's actually, watch his left hand as it starts to emerge in the shot. He's holding note cards. He's got a cheat sheet to answer the really tough, hard-hitting questions like, what memories and highlights from last year stand out to you? All right, so here's his answer to that penetrating question that he needed to use his cheat sheet for. What are the highlights of 2023? What stands out?
Well, one of the big highlights stands out for me is my dad used to have an expression. He'd say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. So many people through the Midwest and in the center of the country, their factories are shipped overseas the last couple of times out, and they were losing hope and faith. So we brought a lot of jobs back to the United States. People are in a position to be able to make a living now, and they've created a lot of jobs, for over 14 million. And I guess when I just feel good that the American people got up. They've been through a rough time with pandemic, but now we're coming back. They're back.
So that's his highlight. That's did you catch it? Did you see? Can you point to the highlight? Is it? No, he got lost. He got lost in the middle of it. I'm not sure what he was saying. And by the way, neither is Jill. Watch Jill in the middle of it.
Have an expression. He'd say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck.
You see? Really? We're telling the Joey story. We're telling Dad, telling the Joey a job's more than a paycheck story. Look at the look on her face. Oh God, he's gone off on that tangent. Who pushed that button? Someone reset him, please. Begging you. And they did. They reset him. They asked him another question. Again, Ryan Seacrest, the tough, penetrating questions. This is Pulitzer Prize material, guys. Ryan Seacrest's next question to the President of the United States on the New Year's Eve show has to do with what he's been eating this week.
I'm curious, what sort of holiday foods have you been enjoying over the last few days?
I love the I'm curious part. I am fascinated by what makes Ryan Seacrest tick here. Aren't you? I mean, if you had the opportunity, very few of us have the opportunity to ask the President of the United States a question, right? And I understand he's not a hard-hitting newsman. He didn't have to get into, what did you know about your son's businesses with overseas interests? I'm not expecting that from Ryan Seacrest, okay? By the way, that's why he got the interview, because no one's expecting that from Ryan Seacrest. But you got, 5 minutes with the guy. He's the leader of the free world. He's the President of the United States. He's our commander-in-chief. You probably get 3, maybe 4 questions, and one of them is, what kind of food have you been eating this week? I'm curious. That's the extent and depth of Ryan Seacrest's curiosity. Although, I got to hand it to him, and Jake Tapper is just kicking himself right now. He actually got a fascinating answer. The answer to what food have you been eating this week actually gives us more insight into where Joe Biden is in his life right now than any other question we could have asked.
Well, I've been eating everything that's put in front of me. I've eaten pasta, which I love. Eating a lot of chicken Parmesan. I've been eating all Italian foods, basically.
And ice cream.
And ice cream, chocolate chip ice cream.
I'm curious, what sort of
I mean, need we say more? That's the man with his finger on the button. I love that Jill had to remind him about the ice cream. Joe, we talked about this before the interview. Before we sent these questions to Ryan Seacrest, we talked about what our answers would be. That's why. And by the way, again, let me just point out one more time, if I may. Take a look at his hand there. He's got notes. He's got notes in his hand for the all-important and terrifying "What food did you eat today?" question. Ice cream. But that's not all. We've got more from New Year's Rockin' Eve. Green Day appeared. Remember Green Day, kids? I know. It's like 1994 all over again. Green Day performed their one song that everybody knows, American Idiot. And they changed the lyrics to be tough and edgy against Trump and MAGA. There you go. Did you hear it? I want to be a part of the MAGA agenda. That's Green Day being really edgy on Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve. I mean, honestly, you're showing up to be super edgy and super tough and super, yeah, I'm going to show those Trump maggots what I think of them. And you're doing it on Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve. It's a gig that Taylor Swift's people turned down because it's too embarrassing. Hey, we'd really like to get Britney on Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve. Excuse me. Britney Spears has a reputation to protect. All right, she is not going to damage her profile by showing up on New Year's Rockin' Eve. All right, we'll have to ask Green Day instead. Yeah, I'll be there. All right, which brings us to Karine Jean-Pierre. Karine Jean-Pierre, I don't know, it doesn't actually bring us to Karine Jean-Pierre, but it's the only way I could transition. But it has, just so you know, Green Day on New Year's Rockin' Eve has absolutely nothing to do with Karine Jean-Pierre. But here we are. Karine Jean-Pierre did a full media blitz this morning. It's the first working day of 2024, and she had a lot to say about the White House agenda.
So look, the president has always put equity at the center of every policy he's put forward, every legislation that he's put forward, because we understand that
every person that he's hired at the White House,
many communities have been left behind. We're not trying to do the trickle-down economics. We really, truly are not. So look, the president.
There you go. We truly are not trying to do trickle-down economics. It's all about equity, because people have been left behind. Now, I hate to point this out to Karine Jean-Pierre or anybody else, but other than the 4 years of President Trump, the White House has been dominated by either Joe Biden's agenda or Barack Obama's political agenda, 8 years straight with him. So we're looking at 11 years of left-wing Democrat-controlled agenda in the White House, interrupted by just 4 years of Donald Trump. And say what you will about 8 years of George Bush, but it was hardly the most Reagan-esque economic policy that we've ever seen. His entire presidency was really focused on the war and on the military, and understandably so, given the fact that we were attacked 1 year into his presidency. So really, you've had 8 years of Clinton, 8 years of fighting terrorists, 8 years of Barack Obama, and now 3 years of Joe Biden, interrupted by 4 years of Donald Trump. And we're told that people have been left behind in this country. Well, who left them behind if that's the case, actually? But it does explain everything when Karine Jean-Pierre says that every single agenda item that Joe Biden pushes is shot through the lens of equity.
The president has always put equity at the center of every policy he's put forward, every legislation that he's put forward, because we understand that many communities have been left behind.
There you go. And that's explains everything about this White House, actually. Incredibly instructive and frankly makes a lot of sense considering the mess that we're in right now. This is what equity looks like. By the way, if communities are being left behind in this country, and that's a dog whistle, when somebody stands up and says, we need to focus on equity because communities have been left behind, what they're saying is this country is racist. What they're saying is that this government is racist. What they're saying is, if you are born in this country and you aren't white, you don't have a shot unless Joe Biden comes in as your savior, right? So if that's the case, why exactly are people from every country on this planet flooding across our southern border to try to be a part of this inequitable, racist, systemically broken country where communities are being left behind? I'm thinking most of the people pouring across the border down in Texas, I'm thinking they all belong to the very communities Karine Jean-Pierre is talking about. And they're fleeing countries that are also populated by those communities. But it's so bad in their home country, they want to come to America, where they will be left behind, according to Karine Jean-Pierre. You have to be a left-wing socialist to understand the logic of that. But that's where we are. She wasn't done. She had more to say.
It is shameful that a Republican governor, Governor Abbott in Texas, is using migrants as a political stunt. That's what he's been doing.
So you're
for
referring
past
to
2
the
years, and he
busing of
continues.
migrants to northern cities?
Yeah, I want you to look at these numbers real fast while she's talking about this political stunt. So 31,200 in New York City, 3,400 Philadelphia, 25,000 Chicago, 12,000 DC, 11,000 Denver, 1,200 Los Angeles. Come on, Governor Abbott, what the hell is wrong with you? You can do better in LA. That's the second most populous city. So let's do quick math here. 54,000, 57, 70, 82, 92. It's under 100,000. It's under 100,000 illegal aliens that Greg Abbott has bused to these cities. We're looking at over 8 million that has crossed the border in the last 3 years. This is literally a drop in the bucket. And this is what she's exercised about. That he has put them on buses or planes and sent them to the cities that have claimed sanctuary for these very individuals. They got to grandstand and bump their chest and pat themselves on the back about how compassionate and welcoming they were in their cities. They won elections based on the fact that they embraced the values of the Statue of Liberty. And so Greg Abbott has said, okay, fine, here's under 100,000 of the 8 million we've had to deal with. And suddenly that's where the crisis sits. The crisis sits in Chicago with 25,000 people instead of El Paso with millions of people. But she continues here.
And the busing of migrants, the putting them on flights, it is shameful that that is occurring. And instead of, if the governor really, truly wants to deal with this issue, he should talk to the senators in his states.
Yeah, the senators in his states. It's the senator's fault. It's Ted Cruz's fault, you see. Quick explanation here for you, and then we'll move on. But she called this a political stunt, right? It's a political stunt. And she's right. It is actually a political stunt. Do you know why politicians do political stunts? Because it demonstrates something, because it shows something, because it works. You see, a political stunt is orchestrated by a politician so that the people in this country can actually see a lesson, so they can see the ramifications and end results of a policy. So she's not upset about the plight of these individuals. She's upset that Greg Abbott sending them to the cities actually shines a light on the destructive policies she's responsible for in the Biden White House. And I know that the mayor of Chicago and New York and and Boston, they're getting a lot of press right now because they've been decrying the fact that too many people have come into their cities and they can't take care of them, and they got to do something about the crisis. And I know that Eric Adams is getting a lot of attention there in New York because he's really pushing back on the White House. No, he's not. No, he's not. They're not saying close the border, these mayors. They're not saying enforce our immigration laws as they stand. They're not saying stop with the bogus asylum claims. They're not saying any of that. You know what they're saying? Give us money. They're saying, give us more money. They just want more money. They're fine with the human destruction that's taking place and how it's affecting the citizens of their cities. They don't care about that. They care that they can't afford it. And Joe Biden will find a way to write a check for them because it's an election year, after all. Karine Jean-Pierre, more on MSNBC.
But you said it, Jonathan, there is no evidence. And it's not just coming from Democrats, it's coming from Republicans as well. There's no there. And it's so unfortunate that Republicans in Congress want to focus on the president's family instead of the American family. We want to work with them in a bipartisan way to get things done. We just talked about, leading to your question, we just talked about a list of things that we discussed that we really need to work on for the American family.
Yeah, sure they do. A couple of things here. And of course, she's responding to the calls for an impeachment process this month, which we probably will see. Joe Biden will be impeached within the next couple of months over his family's dealings. But a couple of things I want to point out here. First of all, what she just said there, while she's standing up in front of the White House talking to MSNBC in an interview, she said there's no evidence. There's no evidence at all. You notice she doesn't say that when she's sitting at the podium in the White House during a press briefing. Have you noticed that? Anytime she's asked a question by a member of the White House press pool, she just says, I'm not going to address that here. I'll direct you to the special counsel. I'll direct you to the Justice Department, or I'll direct you to the White House counsels, or Hunter Biden is a private citizen. I'm not going to address any questions about Hunter Biden. Right? That's what she does every single time. But here she comes out and says, there's no evidence. There's nothing at all. There's There's nothing to be said. Why is that? Ask yourself that. If you think it through, you'll figure it out. Why here, standing in front of the White House, she'll make that claim, but not behind the podium during a White House press briefing. And one other thing, by the way, if you're a politician, if you're an elected official, and there's an investigation into you, and you know that you're innocent, you know that there, as she just said, there is no evidence that supports an impeachment. If you're Joe Biden and you're confident that there's no evidence that you have in any way been involved in your son's business dealings, as you have claimed for the last 6 years of your political career, then why are you concerned about an investigation? I mean, an investigation into no evidence will turn up no evidence, right? I mean, if anything, he should be at the front of the line, spearheading this investigation. Fine, you Republicans want to do this? I'm an open book. Let's go, because I know for a fact that I didn't do anything wrong. He's not saying that, though, is he? He's been obstructing this from day one, and he's been lying about it. He started by saying that he had absolutely no conversations with his son in any way whatsoever about his son's businesses, and now we know that that's a lie. We were told that he wasn't involved in his son's business, which is a lot different than never having a conversation about his son's business. But he said he wasn't involved in any of his son's business, and now we've seen the pictures, and we know that he participated in phone calls with his son's clients, so we know that's a lie as well. And then we were told that he didn't financially benefit from any of his son's business dealings, and now we have cashed checks and we have financial transfers of money that ended up in Joe Biden's hands just days after the money was transferred from Chinese concerns doing business with his son. So every single time he makes a claim that there's no evidence, it turns out that his claim is false. And by the way, everything that I just laid out for you there, that's evidence. When Karine Jean-Pierre says there is no evidence, well, she's just lying. And finally, do we have one more Karine Jean-Pierre? Boy, she was busy this morning. We do. Here she is.
3 years than any other president has done in 2
Oh,
terms.
wait, I got to start this one from the beginning because this may be, it's the second day of 2024, and we may have the lie of the year. Are you ready?
So look, I want to take a step back for just a moment as we look at 24, and we're in 24, but just a step back, this president has done more in 3 years than any other president has done in 2 terms. And that is important here, Audie.
Joe Biden has done more in 3 years than any other president has done in 2 terms. Well, I'll tell you this, if you're measuring it by how many people have crossed the country, crossed the border illegally, that's probably true. More people have entered this country illegally in 3 years than most presidents' 2 terms in office, right? 8, 10 million. I don't think any president has that kind of achievement. It's impressive. And also, no other president has withdrawn from a war overseas and left billions and billions and billions of dollars of armaments and equipment, and then never responded to any accountability for his actions. That's true. And I don't think in just 3 years any president has overseen 2 major wars overseas, the Russian-Ukraine war and then the Israel-Hamas war. That is an impressive track record, you have to say. And also, let's face it, the inflation that he's overseen in just 3 years is probably greater than most presidents' 2 terms in office. So I guess I'm wrong. It's not one of the biggest lies. Although I don't think that's what Karine Jean-Pierre had in mind when she made this claim. But I will say this: if Joe Biden is that successful and he's done that much in just 3 years, maybe he shouldn't go for a second term. Maybe he should just rest on. Maybe he should just sort of drop the mic and say, you know what? My work here is done. I've already done plenty. Time to let Kamala Harris take over. That is it for today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you for tuning in here. Again, I'm Larry O'Connor. Follow us on Town Hall at townhall.com or across all the Town Hall media websites. Follow us on YouTube or Facebook. Subscribe and like and share and all that jazz. And come back tomorrow. Tell your friends. I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.